So there was a comment on one of my recent videos asking me what I thought about Ramirez. I thought it'd be useful to discuss how I think about a new centre forward. So typically I ask myself two questions. How does this new striker like to score or contribute to the team, i.e. assists, link-up play, etc. And then secondly, how can or does the team currently create chances, and how could they create chances? And so kind of following in that theme, with regards to Ramirez, she's obviously good at a number of things. So we're thinking chance creation, usually cutbacks or crosses for Redondo at Levante, progressive carries, as we saw with Colombia, using her strength and her running. More specifically, running in behind in the left-hand side half space against high defensive lines, and then also shooting at the near post from the right-hand side of the opposition penalty area. She's also decent at glancing headers from corner kicks or set pieces, although she's not that strong aerially, so she won't be that great a focal point. So an example of said chance creation occurs here in the 50th minute, where she demonstrates her ball-headedness by being the first to the loose ball. And this is expected given she's in the top percentile for forwards with regards to expected assists per 90. I think this is demonstrated quite well by just how great the pass that she makes is. But of course, Man City are well prepared as against many of her other strengths. Alternatively, Chelsea need to try and pass to her more in this channel here, because she has a really strong knack at being able to fire towards the near post and beat the goalkeeper for just raw power. Of course, in this case, it was just her capitalising on a loose ball. So an example of Ramirez progressive carries or creation with her being no slouch, hurrying and harassing the Man City defence, and then through a combination of LJ's path, pushing her wide rather than through that more central space that I mentioned earlier, and Man City's defenders positioning in such a way so that she can't drive into this central area. They're able to rebuff what could have been a more dangerous attack. And looking to the 27th minute for an example of her running in the left-hand side half space against a relatively high line. You see here on the regain, Man City have quite a high line, but just as I mentioned earlier, Man City have read up on this player and immediately we have the defence tracking back, but then they also converge. Side note, I think that this is an issue when assessing Chelsea's efficiency in adapting to Ramirez. Specifically, I'm thinking of how much better are these Man City defenders than the Liga FA defenders. And so we're not seeing the same outcome, the same output that we saw from Ramirez in Liga FA. A quick note on Man City's throw-ins. Typically, Bunny Shaw was the focal point, and they would use her to either play a bounce pass into a sorting player or spin her tracker and drive Man City up the pitch. Next, note this wide unit of three players: the fullback, the wide midfielder, and the wide centre midfielder in Man City's 2-3 midfield shape versus Chelsea in what was meant to be a 4-4-2. Although we can see that Chelsea heavily pushing part of their midfield unit towards the near side to combat the quick combination play that this unit tried to use to create space, typically for the wide midfielder to get into a 1v1 and then cross from out wide to numbers far side. So typically our centre forward, the wide centre midfielder, and the wide midfielder far side. Alternatively, one of the Man City centre backs, such as Greenwood, could play a lobbed pass into the space between the lines, typically where the wide centre midfielder would be, and then they would flick it on out into a wide space for the fullback or the wide midfielder, or centrally for the centre forward. Speaking of alternatives, Man City could also play a long goal kick, with Bunny Shaw drawing the tension by dropping, but then actually playing a longer ball into Kelly, and then she would flick on for others who had narrowed centrally to play off. Chelsea built up in this 2-4 or 2-3 or 3-1 shape deep. It started with Leopold's or Cuthbert deeper, with the other of the two dropping to test if the Man City wide centre midfielders in this 4-1-2-3 press would stick with them or not, given that Chelsea forwards were looking to operate in the spaces behind those wide centre midfielders either side of Hasegawa. See also Liam Charles is the reason that I suggest that this can also be seen as a 3-1, as with one of their centre midfielders pushing higher and then also Charles pushing higher, we end up with that 3-1. With Charles pushing higher, that gives more flexibility on this left-hand side for the likes of Wrighton, Lauren James and Kirby to float, although I should say that Chelsea's forwards were very flexible positionally. To stifle some of that, Man City sought to swarm Cuthbert, especially given her excellent passing range, typically relegating Chelsea to playing the ball into one of those channels for the fullback attack with the option of a forward such as James in this half space position or a forward running in behind. And Chelsea's other option was to play from those defenders into one of those 4 forwards, dropping to link play. Whilst I mentioned that those forwards were relatively flexible, Lauren James initially was somewhat relegated to the left-hand side, given Chelsea were typically trying to build up on that left-hand side, utilising Liam Charles's high position and the overload that entailed. Next, Man City built up in this 2-1 or 2-3 shape with split centre-back. In this 2-1 against Chelsea's 4-4-2, the Man City fullbacks could creep up the wings, and with the centre forwards to Chelsea in that 4-4-2, as well as Cuthbert Leopold, the centre midfielders responsible for marking Hasegawa, Chelsea's compact shape allowed Man City to progress up the pitch. To try and manage this, the centre midfielders and centre forwards tried to flex such that as those centre forwards went out to try and pressure the centre back, the centre midfielders would also try and push a little bit higher to try and make sure Hasegawa could be pressed if she became a natural option. Okay, so we have the same attacking structure that we mentioned earlier. We have that initial lobbed pass, and then we have our 3 players with 2 looking to make movement off the ball, and then the far-sided attackers looking to rush towards the box in case there is a cross from the near side, but also attack any half clearances. Jumping ahead slightly to Chelsea in this 2-3 shape versus Man City's 4-1-2-3 shape. From this angle, we can now see a few things. One, the Chelsea forwards' flexibility. So we have Kirby at centre forward and Mayra Ramirez at right winger. We have Leopold, our centre midfielder, dropping to right back, allowing Lawrence to be able to push higher up on this right hand side. She actually did this on both sides, and doing that, of course, frees the fullback to push higher because they know they have cover, but also it disrupts Man City's press because their wide side midfielders will want to try and track them, thus leaving space for those centre forwards for Chelsea who want to drop and link play. So Chelsea have been able to create that space. However, Hasegawa was just shifted across and made sure it was difficult to play anything in there. Of course, it goes without being said that Chelsea sought to use Lauren James creatively from the left-hand side, specifically her dribbling, which was imperious as usual, and had Man City's defence flexing to its demands, allowing her to be able to link up with others as all of the Man City players' attention was on her. On to the second half, where we have Man City still building up in what is meant to be a 2-3 shape, but at this point being behind, Chelsea have stepped up the intensity from their 4-4-2 contain to a much more intense press, which paid dividends, as shown in the XG graph. Further similarities with the first half include Chelsea building up in this 3-2 or 3-1 shape, with either Cuthbert or Leopold sitting, allowing the other to combine with the forwards centrally, or be an option for a pullback in a wide space to shoot or cross. Changes, however, included the fact that now we have Lauren James being pulled from that left-hand side number 8 creative role. We now have her moved to a right wing position, Hill Canarid's introduction, possibly to mix things up, but also to get her closer to Mayra Ramirez for passing combinations or runs. And of course, from this wing position, she did things only Lauren James can do, till later when she was moved to a centre forward position or left forward position with Ramirez as more of a right winger or right forward. Another similarity with the first half was that Man City's most potent threat seemed to be counter-attacking, although a slight nuance to that is that in the second half, Man City became almost solely reliant on their counter-attacking and the combination or link up of Jess Park and Bunny Shaw. And with that, thanks for watching. I'd love to know what you think of Mayra Ramirez's performance. Could she have done better? Could Chelsea have helped her out? Leave your comments down below. If you've enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, sharing, and giving the video a like. With that, we're out.